So in this training, I'm going to go over exactly what it takes to be an effective cold caller. Now, this is completely different than being an effective inbound salesperson, sales closer, account executive. It's a completely different ballgame. And I'm going to go over the 3 key principles of a highly effective cold caller so you can stay in the game long enough to actually see success, or so you can train a cold caller, whether a new person or an existing person, to be much more effective and book more demos, book more sales calls for you. Now, being an effective cold caller, it requires a completely different mindset. You're dealing with a lot more rejection than you are in inbound sales. If you break down the numbers, it makes a lot of sense. With inbound sales, you're typically closing 20, 25, 30%, 40% on the high end. With cold calling, you're really only talking to probably about 20% of people are even going to give you the time of day. Out of that 20%, it's a small percentage that are actually going to be willing to listen to you or to give you information or even be in the market for what you're selling. And with that high level of rejection, it means that you need a different mindset in order to be successful. Now, principle number 2 is that you can never take things personal. Now, this is universal to all of sales, but it applies even more to cold calling because of that aforementioned high level of rejection, right? If people hang up on you, if people ghost you, it's a little bit more brutal than in other types of sales. You really got to make sure to never take things personal and always take it one call at a time. And the final principle is that with cold calling, remember that you're finding demand, you're not creating it. This isn't to say that you can't convince somebody of your product. This is more to say that not everybody is going to be a fit, and that's totally okay. And this is going to help you maintain a high level of confidence throughout all of your calls. So we'll dive into that a little bit more here in a moment. Now, the number 1 principle, as I mentioned, is having a cold caller mindset. And what this means is that you need to be resilient and you need to be persistent. Meaning that if you get 10 hangups in a row, you got to be ready for the 11th call, because that person might be somebody who's interested or at least willing to speak with you, at least willing to share of what they're dealing with on the day-to-day. And of course, you have to be persistent. You have to continue to make the dials regardless of what's happening, regardless of what you're hearing and the feedback that you're getting from the marketplace. You have to be able to continue to show up. Now, of course, you do want to pay attention to that feedback and make sure that you're making the necessary adjustments. However, for the most part, you have to keep dialing, you have to stay in the game. And this is why these principles are so important to begin with. Now, the second key on the first principle is separating results from your self-worth. Your self-worth is high regardless of the results that you get when you're on the phones. Because here's the thing, you may not make a sale every day. Does that mean that your confidence is going to be completely in the dumps? Does that mean that if you don't close anything or don't sell 2 out of 3 days that you're going to be completely down and out? The reality is that your confidence in your self-worth should come from an internal state that's already established and isn't impacted based off what happens on your sales calls. Remember, your self-worth is high and nothing that anybody says is going to impact that. All right, principle number 2, never take things personal. People are conditioned not to like salespeople. That means that if you call somebody and they can detect that you're a salesperson, their guard is going to immediately go up. Now that means that you need to try to create a connection in a matter of a few seconds. Not everybody is cut out to do that. So first of all, give yourself a pat on the back that you're even willing to be in this game, because cold calling is not easy. However, if you stick with it, it can evolve into a very lucrative skill set. And because people aren't conditioned to like salespeople, there's a number of different things that you can do to help take people's guard down. You can make them laugh, you can evoke curiosity, you can do a number of different things so that people see you as someone that they want to help and genuinely feel good when they speak with you. If you just call and you're immediately asking for things from them without providing any sort of value, then people are going to look at you as a sleazy salesperson. Another thing that helps is that sometimes being the most polished speaker is not the most effective strategy. Sometimes throwing in acting a little bit confused, stuttering a little bit, that actually helps your cause because you seem and you sound a lot more relatable. The opposite of a salesperson, right? If you go in there and you have this extremely highly polished script, people's guards are going to continue to be up and they're not going to give you the time of day. That's where you can showcase this ironclad confidence. But again, that's a conversation for a different day. To help. Once you get somebody talking, once you take their guard down, the best mindset that you can maintain is a curious mindset. Once people start spilling the beans on the issues that they're experiencing on their day-to-day, ask follow-up questions and continue to dig deeper, just like a naturally curious person would do. Just as if you went to lunch with a friend and they were telling you about their last relationship that ended poorly, you're just kind of curious, right? You're just asking questions, you care about them, and you want to maintain and harness this same energy when you're on these conversations, because people can feel that you naturally care. People can tell when you're trying to help them improve their business. And this is the type of connection and trust that you need to build on a cold call in order to get somebody to actually book a demo or an appointment. Now, principle number 3, remember that you're trying to find demand. You're not creating it. And what this means, this is supposed to be a pie chart. I don't know where the pie chart went. So this wasn't working correctly, so I had to switch to a different screen. But what I mean by finding market demand and not creating it is that the reality is that 55% of the people that you're calling on are not going to be in the market for your product at this particular point in time. And that's totally okay. Isn't to say that people can't be convinced, because generally 30% of the market can be convinced with the right angle, with the right positioning, and with the right pitch on your part. Now, the remaining 15% of the marketplace is generally going to be aware that they have some sort of problem. They're going to have some sort of frustration, and they're going to be more receptive to actually hear what you have to say. So why does all of this matter? It matters because you're not trying to sell everybody, first and foremost. But secondly, and most importantly, when people are willing to talk and when people are willing to share what's going on with them, you have to be ready. You have to be an expert. You have to be curious. You have to be a person that they can trust. And you convey this with your confidence. You convey this with your strategic question asking, and you're trying to identify their pain, because people are motivated by pain. If they're experiencing an excessive amount of pain and they want to move in a different direction and solve that problem, and your product positions that, that is what makes an effective cold caller.